Sergeant Isabella Izzy Rossi believed in order. She believed in the quiet, sacred integrity of a correctly filled-out form, the clean lines of a well-organized supply cage, and the unambiguous truth of a balanced ledger. In the sprawling, dust-choked ecosystem of Bagram Airfield, Afghanistan, she was a high priestess of logistics, a quartermaster whose domain of warehouses and shipping containers was a small island of perfect, incorruptible order in a sea of chaos. Her commanding officer, Master Sergeant Frank Evans, believed in order too, but of a different sort. He believed in the natural order of things, where the strong took what they wanted and the clever got rich. Evans was a bear of a man with a booming voice and hands like cinder blocks. His affable good old boy persona, carefully constructed facade for the network of greed he'd built over 2 decades in the army. Izzy's faith in the system began to waver with a single line item, a shipment of 500 high-end, ruggedized laptops, logged as damaged in transit and written off. It was sloppy to simple. Evans's signature was on the form, scrawled with his usual impatient flourish. Izzy knew the transit company. They were meticulous. She started digging. Working after her shifts, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a growing sense of dread, she peeled back the layers of Evans's operations. It was like untangling a knot of vipers. She found phantom companies, falsified manifests, and a complex shell game of supply requisitions that diverted everything from generators and vehicle parts to premium medical supplies into a black market pipeline. Evans wasn't just stealing, he was a logistical virtuoso of crime, and he was supplying half the contractors and warlords in the province. Her mistake was believing the institution she served would protect her for doing the right thing. She compiled her evidence, a thick, damning folder of spreadsheets and shipping documents, and scheduled a meeting with the base's Criminal Investigation Division (CID). She never made it to the meeting. The day before, two military police officers appeared at her barracks. They were polite, professional, and utterly unmoved by her protests. In her personal locker, they found a stash of undeclared cash and a small, high-value GPS unit that had been reported stolen from the armory. The evidence was planted with the same logistical precision she would have used herself. It was Evans's work, the warning, and a checkmate. The investigation was a blur of accusations and disbelief. Evans, her accuser, played the part of the disappointed but firm leader. He produced doctored emails, a coarse statement from a junior soldier, and a mountain of circumstantial evidence that painted Izzy as a disgruntled thief. She was a woman alone, a sergeant whose word was pitted against a decorated master sergeant with a chest full of ribbons and a web of powerful friends. The result was a foregone conclusion. An Article 15, followed by a recommendation for a general discharge under other than honorable conditions. It wasn't just the end of her career. It was an indelible stain on her name, on the Rossi family name that her father and grandfather had carried with pride through their own army careers. Standing in the sterile administrative office, stripped of her rank and her future, she watched Master Sergeant Evans walk by. He didn't look at her, but he couldn't suppress a small, triumphant smirk. He had taken her life's work, her honor, and her faith in the army, and discarded them like a damaged line item. In that moment, the order she had once cherished was replaced by a new, cold calculus. It was the math of revenge. The revenge of the first few months back in civilian life were a special kind of hell. The other than honorable discharge was a scarlet letter that closed doors to jobs, benefits, and the respect she had always taken for granted. Her family tried to understand, but she could see the flicker of doubt in their eyes. The shame they tried to hide, the isolation was a physical weight. But Izzy wasn't idle. She took a menial job at a massive commercial shipping warehouse in Baltimore, a place of dizzying complexity. To her, it was a training ground. She learned the civilian side of the logistics she knew so well, mastering customs regulations, freight forwarding, and the vulnerabilities of a global supply chain. She wasn't just Sergeant Rossi anymore. She was becoming a ghost in the machine. Her first move was subtle. Through a network of loyal NCOs she'd served with, soldiers who knew her character and always found Evans a little too slick, she got her hands on his upcoming shipping manifests. He was getting bolder, moving bigger and more valuable shipments. His next prize was a container of advanced drone components, routed through a commercial carrier in Turkey. Using a throwaway email and a cloned voice modulator, Izzy posed as a customs official from a non-existent European Trade Commission. She buried the Turkish freight company in a blizzard of official-looking, contradictory paperwork about new NATO transport protocols. She demanded inspections, threatened fines, and tied the shipment up in so much red tape that the container sat baking in a Turkish port for 3 weeks. The drone parts were ruined by the heat. Evans lost a fortune and his buyers were furious. It was a pinprick, but it drew blood necks. She targeted his network. Evans used a series of shell companies, to bid on military surplus auctions. Izzy, using her own newly created anonymous LLC, began bidding against him. She didn't need to win. She just needed to drive the prices up. She'd force him to pay double for a container of scrap metal or a set of used vehicle engines, eating into his profit margins. She knew exactly which lots held the valuable parts he was really after and bled him dry for them. To his books, it looked like bad luck and unexpected market competition. Her masterpiece was an operation she called the Quartermaster's Gambit. Evans was planning his biggest score yet. A container filled with military-grade communications scramblers and surveillance equipment worth millions. The shipment was manifested as decommissioned radio parts and was being routed from a base in Germany through a commercial port and onto a private cargo ship. Izzy, now an expert in the system, saw the flaw in his plan. He was using a specific military transport designation, a T code, that was efficient, but had one vulnerability: it could be rerouted by a priority-level logistics update from a verified source 2 days before the shipment was set to leave Germany. Izzy hacked into the network of a small, underfunded recruiting station in rural Wyoming. It was the system's weakest point. From there, she burrowed her way into the Army's vast logistics network. It was the digital equivalent of sneaking onto a battleship through a porthole. She found the shipment and, with a few keystrokes, changed its final destination. She didn't send it to a random address, she sent it to Fort Lee, Virginia, the home of the Quartermaster Corps. Specifically, she rerouted it to the main receiving dock for the base's annual Inspector General IG audit, a top-to-bottom review of all base operations, and she timed its arrival for 1400 hours on Tuesday, the exact moment the Inspecting General was scheduled to be personally reviewing warehouse intake procedures. The climax and resolution: Master Sergeant Evans was on a video call with his buyer, assuring him the shipment was on its way. When his phone buzzed with an automated delivery notification, his stomach turned to ice. The notification said his container of decommissioned radio parts had been successfully delivered and signed for at the IG inspection site at Fort Lee. At that exact moment, on a pristine loading dock in Virginia, a 2-star general was watching a demonstration of new inventory scanners. A forklift operator, following his orders, offloaded a large container from a truck. The general, a logistician by trade, glanced at the manifest. Decommissioned radio parts from Germany, he mused. That's an unusual priority routing for scrap. Let's pop it open for a spot check. Always good to keep the troops on their toes. The doors of the container swung open. Inside, it wasn't scrap. It was a treasure trove of cutting-edge, top-secret electronics gleaming in their new packaging. The general stared, his face hardening. The base commander paled. The SID agents accompanying the general, who had just received a detailed, anonymous tip about this very container, stepped forward. The fallout was spectacular. The investigation unraveled Evans's entire network: the money trail, the shell companies, the coerced soldiers who were now eager to talk in exchange for immunity. It all came crashing down. The evidence against him was so overwhelming that he was arrested on the spot, his public shaming swift and absolute. During the investigation, the planted evidence against Izzy was uncovered for what it was. Her case was reviewed, her name officially cleared, and her dishonorable discharge was reversed. The Army offered her a formal apology and the chance to be reinstated with back pay and a promotion. Izzy flew to Virginia to meet with the general, who had opened the container. She stood before him in a sharp civilian suit, a successful logistics consultant who had just landed a major contract with a private shipping conglomerate. Sergeant Rossi, the general said, shaking her hand, "We owe you an apology and a debt of gratitude. Your old post is waiting for you. If you want it,